Nervousness. Now I've got itches in my forehead or top of my head. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about world building. Just to get started, so you know who I am. My name's Kara. I'm a yoga teacher, 200 hours, 200-hour certified yoga teacher through my vinyasa practice. And I write dark psychological fantasies that are epic adult series that I'm working on, inspired by my past with world knowledge and things I've learned through my own healing journey woven in. So it takes me a while to write, but I want to share a little bit of my writing process in the hopes that it gives you some ideas for your own world that will make it more invigorating and understanding for your readers, thereby drawing them in closer instead of pushing them further away. I have some notes, but I tend to become a little bit more militaristic, bearing in presentation style things where I'm reading off a script. Sounds robotic. It's not how I like to see myself, and it's lackluster. It comes off as boring to some people. So I just want to do it more conversationally, talking about world building as a whole, talking about what it does for the story, how too much can take away from the story, how too little can be a white room syndrome, which makes it hard for the reader to ground in the scene. There's a lot of things in world building that it's hard to plan in one moment, but over time you get to know your world better and readers get to understand your world better because you have a clearer vision as you write. So I'm going to start a little bit with what exactly is world building? I didn't look up a definition, but I'm going to look in this one. It's called The Only World Building Workbook You'll Ever Need. I believe my writer friend Amber introduced me to this book, or I saw it when I was getting something else she recommended. Can't remember for certain. But world building, it's it's the setting. It's what you want readers to get out of your story. Pretty much you have your character and then you have the world outside your character. Within that, you have the plot, and the plot drives the character, and the character drives the plot. And this the setting or the world and the people that your character interacts with throughout the world will greatly affect how the writing comes off. For example, if you have this really exciting world that you want to bring out, but the character is also struggling with mental health, there are ways to show that where there are moments of doom and gloom, but then sprinkle in moments of hope that can drive the character further, even if they are still stuck in that doom and gloom state. When I when I first started doing my critiques, my world sometimes I would have white room syndrome in some points, and then other times the imagery was so powerful, but the details of the plot were a little more vague. So in the writing process, there's going to be times when you have more world building in one scene and more plot in another, and that's part of it because personally, and what I have heard from and read from other authors is that each time something comes through, it fills in the puzzle. And that's the reason there's a need for extra revisions sometimes. My first novel, which I've recently unpublished, but later down the road, it will be tweaked a little and published again because it's the midpoint of the series. When I published that one, I lost my train of thought. But whatever. Uh, so put my I recently put my newest first book in the series on Amazon. And before that, I got beta reader feedback. So I wanted to share a couple of examples from my work and explain what it was in those scenes that drew the readers in further and how it helped me see what I needed to do for this book that I'm now working on. So in the first chapter of The Hijacking of the Witch, Kala, the main character, is going through her morning ritual before she goes to her first day of public school after 3 years of evangelical, fundamentalistic styled homeschooling. The example that I chose, her body ached as she crawled from her mattress, which sat on her polished gray cement floor. They had moved in 5 years before, but her floor had remained the same. No carpet. The floor flooded each time, their gutters filled with stray leaves and dirt. The beta reader feedback in this is already I'm getting the sense that Kala's bedroom is a symbol of her imprisonment in her mother's house. Like Bird Brain, which is Kala's cockatiel, she is locked in a cage. And that is how Kala feels at the beginning of the story. Like, she's hopeful that she can get away from her abusive family. But there are people in her family that aren't abusive and they're victims themselves, and she wants to protect them. She's drawn back and forth between her home life and her dream world. And this is where the next chapter, in chapter two, Kala, because she's so cognitively dissonant about the world she's in and uncertain where she wants to go, she starts learning about her dream working ability long before she has any power within the real world or Earth, which is the logical realm, and Dirawa, which is in a completely different universe, is the twin to Earth, which is all magic. And here's the excerpt. She moved as quickly as her treadless toes on smooth, wet stones would allow. Her distant body tensed each time Kala's spirit fell down. She reached the boat where it jutted from a wiry thicket. Briars dug into Kala's spirit skin. Her distant body twitched at the same time. So Kala is aware of what her body in the physical realm is doing while she's in the astral world. And this is one thing that some of my readers have noticed. It's a little bit more awareness of what's going on in the real world than in some other stories. And so this is how you can kind of bring the reader closer into your world to show like the effects of dreams, nightmares, and abuses on an empathic warrior, spirited person who just wants to have fun. There are other things that really bring the story to life. One of my favorite series is the Wheel of Time series. And while I don't like all the characters. I don't like all the things that happen. There are things about this world that are so real, and I connect with almost all of the viewpoint characters. Some of the antagonists that they had the viewpoint of, there were still aspects of me in the antagonist, but they reacted in a way that I wouldn't react. So it's really well written in that the behaviors the other people in the story, this epic story, do affect the viewpoint characters in other places. For example, you have the main tavern, who is the Dragon Reborn. If you haven't read it, I'm not going to spoil it. The first couple of books are really mystery. There's a lot of mystery on that. So the Dragon Reborn can affect people really powerfully. So just by being in a location, the world shifts. So that's one way that characters can track him or other tavern in the world is by the effect that they have in different locations. For example, accidents that should have killed people that wouldn't, but maybe a paper cut like poison somebody somehow. Just things that don't make sense make sense. I also recently read The Road by Cormac McCarthy, and it is so well written in that I could understand the character's point of view so well. It reminded me of my own relationship with my father, who is no longer with us, who died as a result of Agent Orange in Vietnam War over time. Other things probably led to it as well, but especially since he got Lyme disease. But there are things that you see in the world after so many traumas that you might not have seen in childhood. I loved worship services when I was growing up. But as I got older and saw how it affected me, I saw the darkness that lay just underneath the surface. The way they use music to soothe you, the way they use shame and fear and a false obligation to serve this invisible God that somebody else thousands of years ago said was the only God. It really sets you up for confusion if you're a person that likes knowledge and likes learning different ways of existing and making your own path. So here is a little bit longer excerpt that I decided to put in here to show how I weave it in. I weaved in the religious abuse to the magic that this world has. Here's the excerpt from a little bit later in the story. Sapphira stared at the shadows beneath the churchgoers' feet for a gap where she could escape. Blood-tinted fog rose in spirals from some of them, while others had normal shadows. Six contained the redness. Cause not douchebags. That has to be what it means. She pressed her fingers into she pressed her fingers into the bottom of the pew, testing her solidness as she held back her fire. Her hand didn't pass through. She hissed as her middle finger bent back too far and pulled it back. She cradled her hand to her chest and breathed through the throbbing, fiery rawness underneath her skin. Her breath quickened as she spotted a spot where she could crawl to yet another pew. She could get out through there, but not if people could see her. Shouts of "Amen" filled the air, while people fell down. Not until the pastor pushed their foreheads while they cried and praised God. Sapphira stayed low and crawled with her elbows and knees wide, just higher than a low crawl. Sharp pain shot through her body each time her finger brushed the stiff, thick carpet. At least she didn't wear the dress Kala wore. Instead, she came out with tight-fitting, soft black clothes that allowed her body's stars to shimmer through the thin fabric. She focused on the shimmering around her as she inched her way forward and waited for backs to turn toward her. She made it to the second row of pews, to the right of the side door Kala used to get to Sunday school. Looking both ways, she sighed in relief. Everyone stayed in the center of the church, toward the front, but far away. Everyone stayed in the center of the church, toward the front, but far enough away, with a pew between them. She lifted herself into a kneeling position and sped across the small spot, and she lifted herself into a kneeling position and sped across the small aisle. Sapphira slipped through the door. Heavy footsteps landed on the carpet down the hallway. All the doors to the classroom stayed shut, so someone must have come from the sanctuary. Sapphira didn't wait to see who made the noise. She dashed the last few steps out the glass door into the sun that beat down on the parking lot. She turned as Derek exited the door behind her. He looked around like he expected someone. She stood paralyzed. Shit, he's gonna catch me. In the sunlight, the shadows grew darker. The red wisps sparkled in the glow as they reached toward her. I know you're out here, he said, his voice like razor blades against her spine. She stiffened further, her butt clenched and closed her nerve pathways as she stopped breathing. You won't protect her. We've made sure of that. So the beta reader feedback I got from that is that the church scene is full of magic and powerful forces that play into the themes created. Kala has felt trapped in the church and her family, and now she's actively being subdued by evil forces through a prayer. And here's a note for my second book that I'm doing. I got caught so up in the world building that I forgot put some of the thoughts that the character had a reason to change her mind, not an abrupt decision to trust someone who lied to the people she loves. Beta reader feedback and the Speculative Fiction Writers Association weekly critiques, which you can sign up for on Fridays, really brought my story to life in a way that I could not have done on my own. So thank you to everybody who helped me through that. It helped. So in the scenes where the character walks through the darkness or a dream, if they're having visual distortions because of dissociation or something else, the reader has a hard time grounding into the scene. That's when it comes off as white room syndrome, even if it's darkness as the way it's described. So with those, I added a little bit more introspection, as well as setting up things such as the shimmering darkness instead of just darkness, as the dream world uh, in the imagery before this scene, so that it'll come through easier without having to say every time the shimmering darkness of the dream. That can get redundant. It can cause a reader to feel like you don't trust them. So by setting it up earlier on of what the world looks like if they're returning to a place, you can have a smaller reminder later that's not going to be over explaining. And by doing it in incremental places instead of info dump, you're bringing the reader into the character's world as the character goes through the world. Most of the time, unless there's a reason, like if this person is, say they're a spy or they're a thief or somebody who's doing an observation before they act, it makes sense to describe the world. But you also need to make sure you know that it's the character who's describing the world to himself for or him or herself or themselves for a reason. Otherwise, it comes off as dialogue. Here's a bunch of world. Dialogue. Here's a bunch of info dump of the world in the history of the world. It comes off as disjointed, clunky, and it can cause the pacing to get a little rushed in some areas and then slowed down in other areas and then kind of like jumping around in other areas. And over time, that can cause a reader not only to like not enjoy the story as much, it can cause them to completely reject the story. So there's a lot of things to think about. World building includes everything from the smell in the air. Like there's a slight odd clean smelling in the smell in the air when you change the air purifier. But if you're in, say, Iraq during a sandstorm, you get out of the shower and the steam from that room, you have sand kicking in your nostrils and in your eyelashes, and you wish you had a shower with it in your tiny Connex box that you live in. So, there's a lot of things in the world that can enhance or detract from a plot. And there are ways you can do it. Like if the character is supposed to get off track, you can really do that well with a few extra things mentioned from the world. If you're writing a romance, it's kind of hard to get like really in the romantic theme if you're constantly noticing all the dangerous things around you. Then the sexuality within the story and the rumination about the romance, it comes on more desperate, as in it's a coping mechanism instead of something coming from the heart. So that in itself can really drive the way a story comes off. One of the ways that I do this over time is sometimes I look back on situations that I've been in when I was in survival school, just remembering the tiredness of the muscles, the stiffness as I wake up, and the need to stretch and drink plenty of water before the next hike. Otherwise, my body won't cooperate. If you're going through survival school in the summer, there's going to be different things to think about than if you're going through it in the winter. In the summer, you have to worry about heat stroke and, more bugs and, you know, more snakes and bugs and stuff that are going to bite you and give you disease. But then in the wintertime, you have to worry about freezing. You have to worry about, in both of these, you have to worry about your skin, changing your socks and, making sure they're clean, making sure you use iodine in your water if you get it in the field. Like sometimes, you can have a spring that'll be completely clean, but then a few feet down, you have a creek that if you get the same water from, it could be diluted with like sediment, or it could be diseased in some way because of an animal that's uh, drank there that has some kind of illness, or even just the water itself, the dirt itself, you know, algae and slime. Everything in the world plays a part in a story, in that every decision in every location could have different results depending on who's doing the action, who else is around, what the rules are, what rules they have in this world that you're building, whether it's magical or sci-fi or dystopian, or if it's based in the real world. So there's just a lot of things you can do if you're wanting to research for yourself, if you haven't like stopped to pay attention to the weather, for example. Just going outside and close your eyes, sit in the sun for a few minutes if you can. What do you feel on your skin? What sounds do you hear? Does the sun hit you on one side, but you have a breeze coming from the lake on the other? Do you feel, do you hear the slither of snakes through the leaves and grass? Or the scurry of chipmunks and squirrels as they race to their trees? Do birds fly down near you because they think you might drop something? Do birds fly around and chirp and twitter and just seem to talk to you in the hopes that you'll understand what they're saying? There's a lot of things you can, really experiment with on your own. And even though you haven't experienced situations, you might understand emotions and how that can lead to the way you see the world. So, yeah, just have fun with it. It's really the best thing to do. There's no right way to world build. It's just the best way to do it is bring the world to life through your character's eyes. I'm not great at universal like POV, so I wouldn't know how to do that well. But when it comes to epic fantasies, like sometimes you can really get a sense of a world in that each character sees it in different ways. So yeah, I love this. I sometimes feel like I'm just painting what's been in my head my whole life out onto the page day by day. So kind of helps that I do paintings too. So yeah, that's just a little bit about world building. Over time, I'll probably share a little bit about how I include painting and art and sketches and other things in my world building process to really describe the scene. So, yeah, thank you again for joining me. And if you have anything you'd like me to talk about in particular, uh, other than world building or alongside world building, let me know. Comment down below. What else do you want to hear from me? Yeah, that I guess I don't have anything else specific to add. If you want to sign up for my newsletter, you can definitely do that, and you'll get a heads up anytime I post one of my videos or have something else coming out. Thank you again for joining me, and I hope you got something out of this.